Hey, what's up, guys? We're back. We were a week off with the live stream. Yeah, 2 weeks. We're back, probably, arguably better than ever. At least better looking. But it's again, this is Daniel here, joined once again, as always, by the one, the only.
Hello, hello.
Did you get another haircut?
Nope.
Oh, did you?
Still just the one.
Oh, maybe he showered this week. But
Yeah, I try it once a week.
in honor of the holidays. But yeah, so it's been, we missed a week, so we have 2 weeks worth of pop culture stories, things going on.
Seems like a lot's happened.
Yeah, the theme, as it often seems to be with pop culture, the theme is probably outrage for this week. So we'll break down both the topics this week. Kind of deal with public outcry. So yeah, let's walk through that. Let's talk about that. What does that mean as Christians? Is this justified outrage, or should we dig a little deeper? Anything else is going on for you this week? Anything crazy?
Well, my sister got married this past weekend, so that was a big deal. We had a lot of fun. I got to see family, so that was super exciting.
Yeah, I learned something this week. Kind of a public service announcement that if you're unloading the dishwasher and you're unloading a sharp blade from a blender, I encourage you always grab the handle first. I think this Band-Aid is the only thing holding my finger on to the rest of my hand right now. So I did learn that. But again, let's jump into the topics. A lot going on. The first one's kind of two-parted. This kind of movie boycotts. There's been a lot of hashtag boycott something this week. Again, the first one we talked about, was it 2 weeks ago or a couple weeks ago, a couple episodes. Cuties, kind of the whole controversy with that movie by Netflix, the marketing, kind of how it was being accused of sexualizing these, young 11-year-old, 10-year-old children. Again, at that time, the movie hadn't been out yet, so it was kind of preliminary outrage. Now it's being released. People have seen the film, and there's, I think, probably even more outcry. And again, I've seen both sides of the argument on this, but overall, a lot of boycott this, a lot of outrage.
Yeah.
And then the other one, Mulan, it's a movie we actually both did see.
Yeah.
Again, you can check out our review of it. We weren't crazy about the movie, but the behind the scenes stuff. There's been a lot of boycott Mulan, based on some of the
hashtag cancel Disney Plus.
Yeah, cancel Disney Plus, cancel Disney.
And Netflix. I've seen calls for cancellation of their Netflix account over the cuties and
and again, so I thought we should just talk about what does this mean for Christians? Boycotts seem to be kind of, in some ways, the go-to response to when we're mad about something. I think Disney has probably been canceled every month for 45 years. Netflix has been canceled. The NBA has been canceled. Everything has been canceled at some point. But kind of this, the boycotts. Any initial thoughts? And we can get into some of the details of why people are calling for it, but just...
Yeah, well, I think we've talked about this before some, and how you talk about, I think, just how ineffective boycotts tend to be. It's sort of just a mechanism to say you really don't like something, which I think it's fine, and I think it's good to speak up about things that you don't like or disagree with, but as it seemed to necessarily, it's like, okay, there's a week of outrage, and then everybody kind of moves on with their life, and so it's like maybe it's a bandwagon thing, and I think obviously for both Mulan and for Cuties, I think there's some legitimate concerns and some legitimate reasons to be upset about it, but yeah, so I guess the question would be, if you find out these things, what's the appropriate response? Is it like cancel the whole company? Is it never see a film by that director again, that producer, those actors?
How much boycott is enough boycott?
Right.
And again, I think we'll see too. I don't think either of us are necessarily anti-boycott. I think some things should be boycotted.
Yeah.
But yeah, these films, they're both Cuties is kind of, it's the outrage comes from what's on screen. Again, we haven't seen the full movie. I've heard somewhat mixed reports on it. I've gone and watched some of the clips, and I can see why people are kind of disgusted by what they're seeing. Anytime a camera is zooming in on like the twerking butt of a 10-year-old girl,
that's a problem. Yeah,
I think regardless of what story it's going for, I think there's this there's visuals. We need to have a conversation about, is that worth kind of the trade-off of making this point. So again, that's kind of the on-screen stuff. The Mulan it's really two different areas that it's kind of the behind the scenes. The lead actress got in some hot water for some of her comments about kind of the Hong Kong protests. So that was kind of a couple months ago before the film came out. But the more recent is some viewers have spotted in watching the film that at the very end of in the credits, the movie, the directors, whatever, are thanking the different governments and stuff that of where this was filmed. And some of the scenes of this movie were filmed in a location, if you haven't been keeping up with the news, where a lot of human rights, serious issues and violations have been going on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Muslims that have been kind of put into these what they're calling kind of re-education camps, which everything that's trickled out has revealed it to be a lot more going on than just this voluntary school. And again, we're not going to. There's people more qualified to get into all the politics of it than we are. But as far as this sort of a moviegoer, that's raised issues. People are calling to this film as being filmed, in a place that kind of ignoring all the stuff going on, which just sort of raises a question, because that's that doesn't affect the film necessarily, but I think it does reveal some kind of behind the scenes of Hollywood, perhaps some double standards. Any of these thoughts on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I saw a tweet, and I don't remember who it was from, but sort of comparing, I think it was a while back. I think the state of Georgia, a lot of movies, especially a lot of Marvel movies, have been made,
which is Disney as well.
Yeah, which Disney owns, has been made in the state of Georgia, and which is where we are. And I think, Disney made a statement basically saying, like, well, we may have to consider, moving our operations somewhere else if, like, the political, I don't even remember what it was, so whatever political stance that
it was
the
like
governor had taken,
some newer abortion laws.
Yeah,
so they kind of threatened. We're not going to film if you don't revoke these laws. We're
but then to turn around and be doing business with a regime that is human rights abuses have been leveled against it, and obviously some really not good things that are happening over there, and like just sort of proudly stick that up at the end of their end of their movie. And I think it just shows the power of the dollar, right?
Yeah,
it's
like, I think
everyone's here to make money, and so they'll do, if they think they can make money by not filming in Georgia but filming in certain places in China, then they're going to do that.
And I think it sort of shows too, and I think we'll see it shows on kind of both ends, but the double standards and kind of the grandstanding of hashtag boycott this, where in a lot of ways it does become kind of it's an empty gesture.
Right.
They care about human rights and some of these laws. They're going to pull out. They're not going to film in places where they have questions about the the ethical stuff going on. When it's popular to do that, but then they these films, a lot of them are filming in places where there's these similar issues going on. Some of it's just because of the scenery, some of it's because of the cheaper, it's cheaper for movies to film in places like that. But again, there's double standards.
Definitely,
it definitely raises questions as far as a lot of this sort of noble white knight preaching. We care about these issues. It shows how deep do those really go. But again, something I was thinking about too, that I think and see maybe if you agree or not, it kind of goes both ways though, because I think sometimes our initial reaction is to jump on board and boycott. How could this Disney, these double standards, and they don't really care. But the reality is that other than when it's made known to us, like in this case, when's the last time you ever checked where a movie was filmed, or or even where the clothes that we're wearing as we're typing our angry boycott, like we don't do that on a day-to-day basis.
Right. Because you can't check, like, it's hard to live a life and constantly be like checking the supply chains of everything that you own, right? Like that's not a reasonable thing to do, because most people don't do that, right? And so, but I guess the difference would be if it comes to your attention that something very bad has happened to get you to some point or to produce something that you use. Well, then what do you do with that information? And I think that's sort of the difference that perhaps with the credits at the end basically pray. I think it'd be one thing if it was filmed there, but then to include it in sort of your credits, to give a big shout out to the security forces at whatever place, and it's like, okay, well, that, like, it'd be one thing if it was just filmed there, but now you're thinking the security people.
Yeah, we don't know how many, and we don't know how much it was even filmed there, but yeah, it's definitely.
But there's a bandwagon effect that happens if someone spots some issue with company X, and then like brings that to light, and then everyone just kind of piles on, and it's like,
you see that with the cuties. Not to jump back and forth, but a lot of most people that are making these big statements haven't seen the film,
right?
And I think you can still, we haven't seen the film. We've researched it, looked up scenes. I think enough to make an educated thought on it. But again, I want to avoid being too, clear with my boycott, my opinion, as I haven't seen it. But again, I think there is sort of this bandwagon. It becomes almost this like virtue signaling of, oh, I'm boycotting this. We stand for injustice. When again, just like I think some of these Hollywood companies, if you were just look in our closets and look around our house, we hold a similar double standard. I thought it is interesting. Something that stood out to me in this story is that the kind of in light of all this going on, that the Chinese government actually kind of put out some calls, some regulations to the media outlets in the area to basically not cover this movie. And it's resulted in the movie not doing well. It was kind of catered to the Chinese audience, and it's fallen pretty flat. For Disney, it's very disappointing. But in a way, it's handling the boycotts by kind of almost enforcing a boycott, and it just made me think as far as what does that tell us about that the film itself is kind of boycotting just to end the discussion. It's sort of like it's easier just to make it go away, boycott it, than have to actually talk about what's going on.
Yeah,
it kind of made me think too. I think we need to be careful of the same thing. I think it's easy to type boycott something. It's a lot harder to actually have a conversation about these issues, whether it's cuties, kind of on-screen issues, or behind-the-scenes stuff. Boycotting it might make the film go away, but the issues kind of culturally remain.
Right.
So I think we need to be careful that I think there are things we should boycott, but not to let that kind of end the discussion, but rather allow that to be kind of start the discussion.
Yeah.
Talk about deeper things. But again, the next another kind of controversial thing that I don't know how much you've seen of this.
I've seen a little bit of it. Yeah.
Again, this is sort of the next step in an ongoing controversy regarding the Oscars. If you remember, I can't remember, maybe it was about 3 years ago, when the Oscars So White controversy kind of happened, when people began to point out that I think upwards to maybe about 94% of the voting body of the Oscars were like 64-year-old white males, and that a woman hadn't won Best Picture, and that there's a lot of people kind of, as our whole culture has kind of become more aware of the importance of inclusion, diversity, kind of looking at the films that are winning, the people represented, and say, hey, this doesn't really match up with sort of what we believe about inclusion, and kind of letting everyone have a voice and an opportunity. So the just recently released is some new rules for, again, this only applies to the Best Picture movie, but there's the Oscar, like the body itself came up with a new standard in order to be eligible to win Best Picture, and kind of in a simplified form. Basically, there's four kind of boxes to check, and in order for a film to qualify as the Best Picture, it has to check at least two of these. One is on-screen representation. Has to have at least either one lead actor or 30% of the secondary characters represented by a minority group. The second box is off screen, so that's kind of the same standards but applying to behind the camera, editing, sound engineering. Certain percentages has to be kind of a less represented group, whether that's ethnic or sexual identity or even kind of mental or physical disability. The third one is kind of company-wide. Is the company that's making the film has to have a certain amount of kind of programs in place to educate and give internships to minority groups. And then standard D, or the fourth group, is kind of in the marketing, and in the people involved in marketing these films have to meet this certain standards. They just announced this the other day, and it's been met with very passionate opinions on both sides. Some people are just praising this. This is the next step that we needed. This is finally kind of moving the conversation forward. Others, including a lot of actors and people in the industry, responded in backlash. Saying this is horrible. This misses the point. What about all these films? How many films that have won the Best Picture are now going to be disqualified by these new standards? And again, I think it raises an important conversation. 'Cause Hollywood, I think our whole culture has been having these discussions, but it's kind of amplified in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It kind of like almost a case study for where we are as far as like representation and the importance of being inclusive. But so these new rules raise a lot of questions as far as is this a good thing? Should Christians should we be happy about this stuff, that we're giving more opportunities? Is it a dangerous path when you start putting kind of ideological requirements on something like the Best Picture, and you exclude things based on just kind of social issues? But any kind of thoughts on, is this?
Yeah, there's a few thoughts. Well, yeah, I mean, I think the first thought would be, are the Oscars there to exemplify the best in cinema? Where is it the best actors, the best screenplays, the best writing, the best directing, the best cinematography? All sort of the cream of the crop is Hollywood, or should be the Oscars, or is their goal something else? And so I think if it's something else, then this serves that purpose. If it's just to promote the very best that the cinema world has to offer, then I feel like it's a bit defeating of that purpose. And so anytime I see things like this, my first thought is, so let's put a religious spin on it. And maybe that's not point for point, but if any of these had a religious checkbox, like if you just think of any of these requirements in religious terms, like they had to be of a certain faith or what have you, then I think that would send a lot of red flags up for a lot of people. But because it's sort of couched in this ideology that the representation needs to be a certain amount, whatever, and who's to say that's the right amount, then it can be praised as a progressive step forward, rather than perhaps not necessarily the best approach to movie making.
And I think it does kind of set down a bit of a dangerous path. What it brought to mind, if you guys saw the video, remember, I don't know if it's the most recent, or maybe it was 2 years ago, but the VMAs when Taylor Swift won for Need to Calm Down, kind of her kind of LGBTQ kind of anthem song. And in her acceptance speech, she kind of made some very passionate speech about, by you voting for this video, that means that you want a world that's, and basically kind of married the ideology of her song with her art, with her music, with her video.
Yeah.
Kind of like, if this wasn't your favorite video, then obviously,
you don't care about these things.
then you don't care about, the oppressed people in the world. And, which is sort of an unfair standard. I think you can like a film, the technical quality, a bunch of things, without necessarily marrying it to the current right now kind of ideologies and social discussions going on. So again, and I think, and I've talked about this before at the collision of some of the articles. I think the issue of representation is a needed conversation. I think that it is an issue that
absolutely.
If you go onto the Oscars website, you can see they kind of break down some of the the percentages of how much. And again, Hollywood is still very much driven forward just by kind of white male, either in front of the camera or behind the camera. There are groups that are not represented, but the issue isn't that. It's not necessarily disagreeing with all of that, but it's
how do you
it's the method. It's
right.
kind of, are you I think as soon as you start kind of putting requirements on a film outside of the film itself, and it becomes more of like a vehicle for social justice and issues, then I think you kind of hollow out that award. It becomes kind of more of a token. This film was maybe better, but it didn't meet. It only it fell a few percentage points short on representation. There weren't enough kind of LGBTQ people working in the editing department, so it's not the best film. And it's sort of like holding a gun to the to the conversation, kind of forcing these producers and these companies to try and do things to meet the standard if they want to win Best Picture, rather than kind of doing more helpful, like helping give the opportunity so that there's a bigger body to choose from when it comes to.
Yeah, it's sort of enforcing a standard and then hoping that down the line the industry makes the necessary adjustments to meet that standard, rather than going down the line in the industry and giving those opportunities to people earlier on, or access to underserved communities sort of at the beginning of the pipeline, rather than like putting a stake down at the end of the pipeline and saying once you get here you need to have these things in place. If you go back to the beginning, like a lot of times it's just people don't have the opportunity to begin with, and so they never get into that pipeline. And so rather than fixing the entryway, you're going down line and then hoping that the companies will figure out a way to fix it on their own. What I did find a little bit humorous was with the LGBTQ plus requirement, like it just kind of struck me as an odd one, because it's like, so you could have a bunch of gay white men in a film, but like, do you know that they're gay in a film? And like, so you can check that, like, so it becomes this like sort of like, oh well, I can figure out a way to kind of check this box. Like, oh, all those people in the background, all those white guys, those were all gay guys. And so we actually did check, the 30% box.
And I've seen other, because again, some of the underrepresented groups, you immediately think of like a woman of color, but in the same fine print, you also have someone that is deaf or blind or hard of hearing.
Well, it was deaf and hard of hearing, but blind oddly wasn't mentioned.
Oh,
which was
so. I've seen some kind of commentary saying like this is sort of another case of kind of grandstanding, that we're not a racist organization. We are inclusive, but because there's so many outs, I've seen some people break down that pretty much it's going to be hard for a company not to meet at least two of these. So the jury is out on how much this will actually change things, but again, I think it's almost like we want to have the answer without having the kind of working out the problem, because I think like women directors, they aren't winning awards at the same rate as men, and I think the reason for that is that there's a lot fewer women directors making films.
Right.
Not that they're any less talented. So the answer, I think, to that is to find ways to get more women the opportunity to direct bigger films with bigger budgets and telling better stories.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to kind of enforce it at the back end, but I think this is an issue that Christians, it's not as easy of a discussion as soon as we make it out to be, but I think it's one that Christians definitely have a lot to contribute to it. I think anytime you get into like inclusivity and kind of unity and kind of the underrepresented or oppressed groups, I think Christians should be at the forefront of that conversation. But I think this is sort of an example of the kind of the Hollywood world trying to find answers to that problem in a way I don't think is super super helpful. But this week at the Collision, again, we encourage you guys. I might actually post the article we did about boycotts. I might kind of do a repost since we've been talking about that this week. But we did some reviews. We already mentioned those.
Yeah. We reviewed Mulan and we reviewed Tenet recently.
Yeah. Rumor has it that Sam was actually moving backwards through time in our review of Tenet.
Yeah, so inverted time.
Inverted time,
I believe is the term.
So we encourage you to check that out if you haven't caught those reviews. And again, if you do see those movies, I know not everyone's rushing out opening night like in a normal world. But if you see those films, maybe later on, come back, see what we thought, and let us know your thoughts of. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Was your brain as fried after watching a Tenet as ours was? But kind of lastly, obvious things going on in culture.
Well, I mean, I think for the thing that stood out to me, I think was this new guidelines from the Oscars, and it's just kind of an interesting moment in pop culture, and so I think it'll be fascinating to see that unfold in the coming weeks and months, and then also, like, is that really going to change much of what's already being considered for Best Picture? Like, I feel like in many ways we were already kind of there. In a lot of what was gonna, what was getting Oscar buzz and that kind of stuff in the years past. So it'll just be interesting to kind of follow that story and see where that ends up.
And I believe the way these things work, because of how much time it takes, and this year looks back at the previous year, that I think the actual requirements don't go into place until like 2024.
Yeah.
By the time they're actually kind of held to these standards. So again, it's gonna be a long time before we see how it the actual results of this. But I think it's definitely an interesting story to kind of keep up with. Again, I've enjoyed reading some of the people in the industry, what they think of it, because this isn't just Hollywood thinks this, the outside, the conservatives, and other people think this. This is a very divided issue. For me, one of the big stories, I think it was on last Saturday. I'm repping my boy Mario. Had a big birthday. He turned 35 years old. I'm not a huge gamer, but I love me some Super Mario.
Oh yeah.
In honor, I did boot up Super Mario RPG, which is probably my favorite game of all time. So I played that for a little bit as my kids watched their daddy play some real video games. But again, I love Mario. They have a new collection game, old school games that are coming out this coming week, 3D games. So I will definitely be kind of getting back into some of the nostalgia for that.
Yeah.
But any final thing to say before we're done?
I think that's it. I don't really have a passing word other than just keep looking at culture and maybe don't take the first take of whatever you see online. Maybe just read a little below the surface, whether it's with Mulan backlash or with the Oscars. It's easy just to have a reaction based on the headline or based on your first glance of it, but maybe do a little bit of deep diving into it, or
yeah, maybe that can be our final challenge. If you're gonna, before you tweet, and that applies to not just these hashtags, but before you tweet a hashtag, I encourage you read at least 2 articles, one from each side of the discussion, and educate yourself a little bit before just sort of jumping on whatever the new cultural outrage is. After you do that, you may still want to boycott these things, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, like Sam said, let's try and be a little more thoughtful as Christians in how we engage in these conversations, and not settle for the low-hanging fruit of just cancel it and throw it into the fire. But again, I hope you guys had a great weekend. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then. Who knows what's going to happen in culture, but I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about. So thanks, guys, for joining us, and continue to collide with the world for Christ.